Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another show. Going to be doing a review from another YouTuber that I who likes to document some of the goings on of some of the pre-suppers on Clubhouse. Um, he has a YouTube channel named Clubhouse Debates, and the link for the video that I'm going to be sharing with you is in there. If you go there and subscribe to him. Although he's gaining he hasn't been on YouTube, I don't think, for very long, at least not with that particular one. He's gaining a decent amount of subscribers at a pretty regular clip thanks to some of these videos. The one that I'm going to be doing tonight is going to be this one here: Sean, Darth Dawkins, and versus Darth Dawkins and tag team partner Jay Dodgen. Um, the Redefine Living is also in this particular group, and talks to them for a little bit. If anyone is not familiar with Redefine Living, well, might be in for a treat if we make it that far. This video is a little longer than some of the other ones that I'm used to doing. It's about 51 minutes, so I'm not sure if I'm going to get through the whole thing, and I haven't seen all of it, so I'm going to play it from the beginning. I might speed it up just a little bit, maybe 1.25, go through it, see if anything interesting happens. I seem to remember Darth does get kind of like aggressive with Sean, um, over some of the usual stuff, so I don't recall that being interesting. But I remember, like, I think it kind of like he and JRobin seem to be like tagging each other out in this thing, just trying to beat this guy up over nonsense as usual. So yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Um, Special shout out to GeoSam. Thanks for showing up. And as always, but although you don't always make it here, but when you do, you mod well. So for anybody that I'm waiting for Felix Rodriguez or Otangelo to show up. Although I think Otangelo's gotten bored with me. So, oh well, end of an era. Anyway, let me know if there's any audio issues going on, any playback issues. Just yell at me in the side chat, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Otherwise, let's get started with this, and here we go. Hang on, I think this is already sped up. Yeah. Here we go.
Defend the God world, we're going to do so transcendentally and revelationally, and they're both inseparable. But if he's gonna say that all circular reasoning is off limits, then how does he justify his own ability to reason about anything when he says something, all circular reasoning is off limits? Because you presuppose the basic reliability of your reason. So, Sean, when you oppose circular reasoning, how do you avoid violating that in defending your own reason? How do you do that, Sean?
I always find this kind of thing odd because Dart's already started off with this whole criticism of like, hey, we can use circular reasoning when we want, and how do you guys get away with not using it? And then they'll immediately try to make claims like, oh well, if you try to appeal to your senses, you're using circular reasoning. If you try to appeal to this or that, I'm like, yeah, but there's actually arguments for why that's the case, right? Like a equals a, right, is sort of circular in a sense, but it's not what someone means in a philosophical or logical sense when they talk about circular reasoning, right? A tautology is kind of circular, but it's not, you know, uh, it's not the same kind of circular they're talking about. If you're talking about circular reasoning where you're begging the question, that's when it becomes a problem. And Darth seems to be very quick in any of these conversations to try to shift that burden like he does with everything else. Like, no, we're not begging the question. I'm just asserting that this God is as real as assumed subjective consciousness or assumed subjective experience. Like, yeah, that's a little bit harder to do, mostly because Darth can't demonstrate that he didn't conclude God after assuming his subjective experiences. Like most people would say that that's how it, even is it Aquinas that I think has that, but the order of knowledge, order of being thing. I'll have to look that back up again. I might be getting that wrong. Anyway.
I'll bring him up and let's see what Sean has to say. Good question, Darth. I'd like to know the answer as well.
Yeah, so there's a plethora of compelling arguments for the existence of God. If you look up Josh Rasmussen's argument from Arbitrary Limits, if you look up any of the arguments that Alexander Proust and Robert Koons have put forward, Richard Swinburne, all these contemporary philosophers have put forth a plethora of compelling arguments that I suggest you guys look into, because they're not question begging from the
Can you
start.
answer the question?
That's one of the most
Yeah, you're not
compelling
answering
things
my question.
about them. No, I'm not answering your question, right? I'm going back to the discussion that we were having before I
No,
was
you
moved down
accuse
to.
me of circular reasoning. I
At
want to
least
see how
don't
you.
interrupt
I
him,
want to
Darth.
see how you avoid circular reasoning yourself.
Darth, let him make his point.
Yeah,
Be quiet. You're
you
not
can
a mod,
avoid
Gospel.
circular reasoning when you make
You're not a
arguments.
mod.
Gospel's quick to point out you're not a mod either. I like that Darth's like, yeah, you're not a mod here. Lordy, yeah, already a little touchy from Darth because he's not getting his question answered directly.
Leave it, Darth.
And that's how
Would
you
you
do it.
remove
You
Gospel,
don't
please?
assume. Oh yeah, just remove anybody who you don't like.
No,
Exactly, that's what to
before
do.
you came up here.
So,
I asked you a
as I
question
was
before you
saying-
came up here. Would you answer the
So as
question?
I was saying, a compelling argument for the existence of God is one that isn't going to presuppose God, because that's just going to be questioned off the bat. And that's just going to be easily dismissed, right? As opposed to any of these arguments that Robert Koons or Alexander Proust or any of these.
Oh, sure, Jay. Yeah, sure. Just dangle that over my head. Yeah, you go back to their conversation. Wait, are they talking? Are they talking in a new conversation now? Or are you talking about that old premiere that that Jill put up there when he popped up on their channel a week or so ago? If you could let me know in the chat. Yeah, because I think Jill's got something scheduled for like another 2 weeks from now, which I'm sure I'll probably ignore, or even without really thinking about it, just miss. If anyone's interested, Jill goes by the name, the YouTube channel Rebuke and Reprove. And he is, if you're familiar with guys like D. Roy Cruz or G-Man, Jesus is Lord / Rebuke and Reprove might be worse in a lot of ways. So check him out. But be warned, he's quite awful. Anyway, here we go.
Intellectuals are putting forward.
Can you answer my question, please? When you reason that we are guilty of circular reasoning, do you employ circular reasoning when you hold that your reasoning is basically reliable? Okay.
No.
Okay. How do you defend that?
I mean, how would Darth get out of that, right? Darth's approach to kind of like thinking about God is rationalizing your way to God. It's a sort of hyper rational God. You should see things his way, and you should come to the rational conclusion that the God he's talking about is the only one possible, right? But you can't do that unless you appeal to your reason, right? But you can appeal to your reason. Why? Because the God that he wants you to reason to gave you the reason to reason to him, right? Like he's never going to put it that way, because when you put it that way, it sounds obviously ridiculous. But that is kind of implied from what he's talking about here. Like, oh, you have to assume things about the trustworthiness and the reliability of our reason and our sense perceptions. Well, you do as well, but Darth goes the extra step. Oh no, I don't have to have any confidence in them. I know they've been given to me by this God, and I know that God gave them to me because I can reason back to him. Like, all right.
Your basic reasoning is basically reliable non-circularly.
It's a brute fact.
A brute fact would be one that is unexplained. It would be unintelligible and uninterpreted.
That doesn't mean it's unintelligible. It just means
no,
doesn't have
fact
a further explanation.
No. So then it would just
You're
simply
just confused.
Hold on a second. I'm not confused here. Please stop trolling. If you say that it's a brute fact, so are you saying that your reason operating in a basic, reliable way just simply is without any defense?
So when I make an argument for or against the existence of God, I'm going to
reason. You said reason is a brute fact. Can you? I'm going
to start with the assumption that you and I can both reason and we can both logic.
No, are you employing?
Yeah, we kind of actually have to start from that position as soon as we start talking to each other. Like you assume that from the jump. This has been sort of a little bit of an issue anytime pre-suppers try to really dig into the whole you can't know anything at all because however they put it. Darth is real careful about avoiding the certainty thing because that got blown out of the water when other pre-suppers used it. But it's essentially the same thing. It's essentially what he's going with.
Circular reasoning when you start with your reasoning.
No, I just told you that it's a brute fact. You just don't understand the difference
it's an
between circular reasoning and a brute
in
fact.
other words, it simply exists without a rational defense then. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's certain things that you can present brute facts for that have to be assumed in order to continue.
Well, a brute fact would be something that is stipulated to exist without any reason identifiably how or why it exists. Okay, are we clear on that?
Yeah, there's not going to be any further justification for why you and I are able to.
Are you asserting it arbitrarily?
Reason.
Are you asserting that you have the basic reliability of reason? Are you asserting it arbitrarily?
You can't help but assert it. This is one of the things that I find odd about this, and this was one of the strengths early on from some of the precept things, right? Like the idea that you can't avoid your own reason from the beginning, right? It's sort of the same thing as like the idea that you can't really deny your own existence, right? You can deny aspects of your existence, but if your existence it ultimately boils down to say something like out of the cogito, right? Like you are a thinking thing, right? Or at least your thoughts, right? In the moment that you're doing the thinking and you're doing the doubting about where your thinking comes from, that's the part that's indisputable, right? You can't deny that. So this notion somehow that reason, I mean, this just goes back to this old school Bonson kind of mistake, I think, in the precept argument, where if we can weaponize worldviews and then we can just make the non-Christian worldview look like it lacks the certainty that the Christian one does, then we can paint this image that we're actually the reasonable ones and we're operating from a firm foundation of rationality granted to us by a rational, clear thinking creator, and you atheists are just wallowing in the darkness and crazy and lunatics. And that actually kind of coincides with the way Paul talks about the differences between believers and non-believers. So hey, you know what? They get a lot of confirmation bias when they do this kind of thing, and they think all the puzzle pieces fit together this way. The problem is that if you try to question your own capacity to reason, you use reason to question your capacity to reason, to call into question reason itself. It's just kind of something that you have to do. That's one of the reasons why it is a brute fact. You can't have an explanation for it in this kind of philosophical setting. I don't think that Darth has ever actually accepted that or really understands it. And here he goes with Sean.
No, arbitrariness is when something is asserted for no reason.
Okay,
it's
what
asserted,
is the rationale why
specifically
basic
for
reliability
the
of reason
reason.
exists? What is the basic reason? What is the basic rationality as to why basic reliability of reason exists? What is the reason?
All humans have basic capabilities.
Oh, what is the rationality for rationality? What is the reason for reasons and reasonableness and reasoning? Yeah, I mean, I think Alex says arbitrariness is the quality of being determined by chance, whim, or impulse, and not by necessity, reason, or principle. Arbitrary decisions are not necessarily the same as random decisions, right? And it's not like, it's interesting when Darth says this, like, okay, well, you don't have any. You're just deciding that your reason is reliable arbitrarily. No, he's not. There is a principle for it. If he attempts to deny his reason, he has to use his reason to deny it. The step that, like, Darth is the one that wants to take the add on to this. Darth is the one that's looking. If anything, Darth is actually tacking on something kind of arbitrary. He's taking a deity and saying, that's how you can do it. Click, put that there. Anyone could do that. Anyone could say that we get our ability to think. It's actually, you're not thinking. It's actually beamed into your head. If somebody cuts off the signal source, you just turn into a catatonic, meat bag. the fact that you think that you're thinking, that's part of the programming. But when somebody shuts down the station, the TV, the show is over, and you are just an animated TV set. You go dark. So yeah, this is more of this. Just I mean, really, a lot of this stuff comes from an insipid place for Darth, and it's actually kind of sad to see, because the more I listen to this stuff, a lot of this stuff he just repeats over and over again, because he's frustrated because he's not getting the answers that he wants, and he's not encountering the caliber of skeptics that he wants, or the caliber of the people with the intelligence to really refute this. But the problem is that it's not a question of whether or not he's encountering people smart enough to explain how this stuff works. He's encountered rebuttals to most of these points over the quote unquote 10 years he's been doing this on social media. The issue is he's not listening. He doesn't want to listen. He wants to preach, and he wants to play God cop, and he wants to stop people from, that's all he wants to do. He wants to make examples out of people and punish people who think differently than them, and try to make them look like idiots, and try to call them out and embarrass them and humiliate them and shame them. He's this guy's motivated to religion in the same way, like sort of he's just a kind of a petty tyrant. But everybody knows that at this point. Anybody that knows Darth knows that.
Abilities to reason and use logic, and it's built in.
You're not answering the question.
Stop interrupting me, and I'll answer. I'll
You're
finish
dodging
answering
as
your
you
question.
usually do.
No, I'm not dodging anything.
You're wasting time.
Listen, listen, man-child. Let me finish, and then you'll get your answer. Okay. So
Sean's getting quite bossy there with the language, calling him man-child and stuff. This is getting juicy.
Built into your intuition, yes, even someone like Darth Dawkins, built into their intuition from the time they're a small child, is the ability to put 2 and 2 together, right? And that's an intuitive fact that is not, you're not able to get around unless someone has some sort of, mental issue where they don't perceive reality in the same way as everybody else, right?
You're not addressing the question.
Now, that is the addressment to the question. There's nowhere further to go.
Your basic reliability
we're at bottom here.
You said, okay, is your invocation of the basic reliability reason, is it a non-arbitrary declaration?
Yes. It has to be, right? You would have, I mean, you could deny reason arbitrarily, right? It would be very, what possible reasons could you have? What non-arbitrary explanation could you give to call reason into question in the first place, right? Like Darth seems to think that's possible. Any explanation that is not giving God, the God of the Christian Bible, full credit for the origins of human reason, that's when it becomes arbitrary. But does it? Like, you can't get out of reason by trying to, like, this makes no sense. This is just absolute. This is just a more workaround way of saying you can't be certain, and I'm telling you I'm certain because Jesus. That's all Darth's doing here. And he's trying to couch this in very bad kind of armchair philosophy maneuvers, and it's very pathetic. These kinds of appeals to this, I mean, because there's no other way around this, right? I agree with Sean here. He's that Darth is essentially demanding that Sean provide proof for the origin of reason, for that foundation. And if he can't be certain about anything, right? Or he can't know anything, not really. But Darth is going to avoid saying the words like for certain. Instead he says ultimately all the time. Really, I think he just means certain or certitude.
I've already told you it's not arbitrary, and that's why we're going around in circles.
If it's not arbitrary, then
we're at bottom.
Explain to me how you invoke the basic reliability of your reason. It's not arbitrary.
Hit bottom.
May I finish, please?
It's assumed that you and I are able to reason.
So,
look, Greg Bonson doesn't say that anybody can't logic. He says you don't account for logic.
Okay.
So if you want to make an
listen
argument about
carefully. I know
what
someone's
accounts for
feeding you.
logic,
That's a great point, because that's been abused for a long time. I don't know if everybody caught that, but Sean brings that up. Greg Bonson makes the point that the issue isn't that atheists can't use logic or can't use reason, it's that they can't account for it. And the way that Darth presents it is, and this is why I think he's actually kind of degraded a little bit, because I seem to recall back when Darth started getting into the show, that was the thing for Darth and some of the other precepts around at the time. This would have been 4 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago. It seemed like that was the issue. Like, how do you account for the laws of logic? How do you ground the laws of logic? They never raised issue with whether or not you could know anything or invoke facts, right? At least most of the ones that got into the accounting thing didn't, because they knew better, right? If they understood how the argument was supposed to work from kind of a Van Til or Bouncing thing, the idea wasn't that don't go after the atheist and tell them that they can't know anything or they can't use logic, because they're just going to yell at you and be like, of course we can. Right. The goal of the precept argument is to get them to understand that the reason that they know everything, that's all grounded by God. Right. That's the idea. Right. Not to try to put them. Darth seems to think that, like, the whole point of doing this is to rip the rug out from under the skeptic and say, oh, you can't know anything. And now when you're in that state of vertigo, you realize that you're a helpless, blubbering, confused, moronic idiot. And the only thing you can do is drop to your knees and beg Jesus to save you. He said that part many times. And in some cases, he's used those words. So this seems to be a real problem for Darth, because I don't think he was always this bad about it, but it seems like in order to, like, sort of streamline this, he just wants to know, like, he's asking Sean the same kind of crap, like, well, how do you're invoking facts, are you doing that non-circular? Like, no, you're supposed to be able to confirm that. The idea is, the claim being made by guys in the precept area, especially Van Til and Bonson, especially Bonson, was that Christianity could account for things like truth, morality, beauty, those kinds of things, those big questions, of kind of transcendental truths. To whereas anything else that an atheist would appeal to, things like naturalism or materialism or whatever, couldn't. They were always left asking questions. When Christianity, you had a comfortable certitude, right? Oh, it's all grounded in God, right? Darth seems to have, like, just, like, thrown that one out. And he keeps doing this kind of thing. Like, I've noticed that, like, oh, well, you've committed philosophical suicide. You're philosophically bankrupt. You're intellectually gone. Like, you can't say anything to me because nothing that you know could be true. Or, like, I don't know why he's reverted back to this, but this was stuff that was cast out. Like, I mean, there were guys that were doing this kind of stuff like 5-6 years ago, back when I was just getting aware of this kind of stuff going on, and those guys got laughed out of YouTube rooms, out of the Google Hangout stuff. And here, and Darth is still kind of clinging on to that, and if anything, has kind of reverted back to it a little bit, just a little less obviously.
then go ahead.
Listen carefully. Now, are you opposed to all forms of circularity?
No, I'm not opposed to all forms of circularity. I'm opposed to premise. I'm opposed to premise circularity, which is the circularity you employ when you argue for God from a presuppositional argument. I'm not opposed to rule circularity, which are unavoidable rules of logic that must be adhered to.
Yeah, you're wasting our time. You're doing what you always do.
You're wasting.
Now, how do you?
Okay, now they're starting to get heated, so I'm gonna back that up a couple seconds and get into it. TGJ asks, side note, did you see the Praise I Am YouTube video admonishing Darth Dawkins and the Van Tillians with phone text screenshots? I didn't make it that far. I did try one. I was actually, I was being good. I was exercising, and I had turned that thing on and I cranked up the speed on it. And Praise Talk's a little slow for my comfort, for my my listening enjoyment. And even sped up. I found that particular video was incredibly dull. I think I only made it. I think I listened for 20 minutes, 22 minutes or something. So I maybe made it, like, through the first 45 minutes of it, of actual playtime. I don't think I made it to that part. That's kind of interesting. I don't know whose phone text screenshots he was using, but that's wild. But then again, I wasn't really paying too close attention to the screen when I watched it. Most of the stuff that he had put up there was stuff from, like, not Heisler. Maybe he had Heisler on there, but some theologians and stuff talking about their issues with precept. Kind of criticizing, critiquing Van Til. All right, let me back this up just a second because this was gonna.
For God from a presuppositional argument. I'm not opposed to rule circularity, which are unavoidable rules of logic that must be adhered to.
Yeah, you're wasting our time. You're doing what you always do.
You're wasting.
How do you defend?
You're wasting my time.
Okay,
now,
you know what, Roy?
Stop wasting my time.
This is just bickering.
Stop wasting my time and make an argument for God.
Okay, guys.
That he's a troll. Okay,
I understand.
This is a waste of time.
I understand. I don't know, Sean. I'm going to give Sean the benefit of the doubt.
He always behaves this way.
Okay, well, let me find out for myself. So is there anybody else that wants to pick up where we're leaving off? Because I do agree, Sean, that you're not answering Darth's question to his satisfaction. Okay, but you don't have to. Okay, I'm getting to know you. I want to get to know you. Maybe there's something that I will say or that you will say that will help both of us in our walk, individually, collectively, whatever.
Yeah, to P Barnes. Oh, he isn't a mod in this room. No, he's not. Yeah, so he and I don't even think JRobin is in this particular one. So it's gonna. So this was Roy's room, and Roy his name has been tossed around a couple of times. But yeah, I don't think anybody else. Yeah, from what I can see on the screen, Roy is the only mod in it. So he's got sole control over who comes and who goes.
I totally believe that. I believe that a clock is a dead clock, a broken clock is right at least twice a day. Now, I believe that. Take that for what it's worth. That is not an insult. That is not a slight. That is just saying that when you take the stage and you start with in the beginning, not God, I already know you're wrong. Okay. But just because you're wrong doesn't mean I don't want to hear you out if you're going to be civil. So I am like Darth. We take the same position. We start in the beginning, God. Okay. And as the mod, I would like to open the room up to see if anybody else has any either questions for you or would like to continue what they've already heard, make some sort of commentary. That's what we're here to do. So
how do you non-circularly defend the false statement?
And here comes JRobin.
So hold on a second, Roy. I just want to piggyback on what you just said, and I'm sure that you'll agree with this. We just don't merely start with God. We are starting with God because God has revealed himself to us, even through our self-consciousness. So our starting point is revelational in nature, and without
yes, but denying God or not being convinced that there is a God, whatever your position on that is, the fact that you have that self-consciousness, right? If it isn't it you that doesn't break down because you can't account for it. You just can't account for it. That's sort of the original push of Presup. What Darth and guys like JRobin try to say is, no, you're left in a world of complete irrationality and hopelessly depraved, practically lunacy and insanity. You're fit for the loony bin, because if you need to accept this in order for this stuff to work. Like, no, that doesn't work that way, and they know better. But for whatever reason, they've exaggerated it to this point, because I don't think anyone gave a damn before about you can't account for it. And I don't think Darth and JRobin know how to do that. Darth and JRobin get off on this. Oh, you know what I actually really like doing? I like telling Christians when they try to tell me a fact afterward. I just tell them they don't have a basis to tell me anything is true or false because they don't know if God's true or not. Since they don't have an answer to that question, they can't possibly know anything about anything else. So, that is a completely arbitrary and irrational position to have, almost universally. I don't think I'm being bold by saying that out loud. And yet Darth and JRobin seem to wholeheartedly think that they're the sane ones in these conversations. It's kind of mind-boggling. Like the amount that these guys, the bubbles that these guys have cultivated for themselves. It's a terrible word to use. One does not cultivate a bubble, but the way these guys have sort of isolated their own ability to handle the criticism and the input from other people on these topics is really kind of interesting, because instead of getting better at some of these arguments, they've gotten worse. And even when you see Darth Dawkins do something like, shift something, like when everybody makes fun of him for affirming the consequent, and he makes the change necessary for it, doesn't acknowledge it, makes the change, and then still doesn't really know how to apply it. Makes statements where it's obvious he doesn't understand why that way works, rather than the affirming the consequence fallacy he was making before. Like, he doesn't understand it. He's just applying it that way so that he can't be made fun of again. And he probably, because he went and Googled it, looked it up a little bit, checked it out. Okay, it's coming from even coming from some Christian sources. He can confirm that, yes, that's affirming the consequent. One should not do that. What does he do when he comes back and starts talking to atheists again? He just acts as if he never made that mistake to begin with. So even when they do demonstrate that they're capable of learning something new, for some strange reason they apply it in ways that are even worse than they were before. It's staggering. It's but also kind of interesting to watch. It's a little bit like pro wrestling or something, but like if all the pro wrestlers were high on LSD and you knew a terrible injury was coming. You're just watching for the Schadenfreude.
Which we could not invoke and instantiate God. So we're not just simply saying, well, we're going to assume this starting point because it makes the world meaningful to us. We're starting revelationally that God reveals himself even within our self-consciousness that he is.
Totally agree with that, Sean. It's because I didn't just.
Okay, can I comment on that real quick?
Let me just double down on what Darth said, and you may have the floor. Yes, sir. So I'm not just saying one day I woke up and I'm going like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, there's got to be a God because. No. God called me. I heard him. I said yes. And when God called you, it would be nice for you to say yes as well, but you have the option to say no. So I just want to make sure you understand that.
Yeah, so that's fine. I'm an agnostic. Maybe God.
Roy is modding the shit out of his own room at this point.
God will call to me one day. Who knows, right? My heart isn't hardened. Okay.
Hang on, did he say he was?
Yeah, so that's fine. I'm an agnostic. Maybe God will call to me one day. Who knows, right? My heart isn't hardened. Okay, but the point is, what you just said, when you say I start with God, okay, and God is the necessary precondition for everything that I believe, that's a statement of faith, which is not a logical argument, right? And there's nothing wrong with statements of faith. My mother is a true faith believer. People of faith all over the world are doing great things, and that's purely rational. It's a rational thing to do as well. But faith, thing that I believe, that's a statement of faith, which is not a logical argument, right? And there's nothing wrong with statements of faith. My mother is a true faith believer. People of faith all over the world.
I'd like to know what that sound was. It sounds like a fat kid pulling his hand previously stuck out of a Pringles can. I don't know what that, or maybe he's uncorking a bottle. Ooh, shame on you, Darth. I'm very well aware of the sound of corks being pulled out of bottles. I enjoy spending time in my cups, or at least it did. Yeah, he had a little bit of an echo going on there, so I don't know what was happening there, but I thought he was making, at first I wondered if maybe he was just making an intentionally rude noise, but oh well. False alarm. Sorry, folks.
World are doing great things, and that's purely rational. It's a rational thing to do as well, but it's not an argument, and it doesn't enter into philosophical discourse. What you're basically saying is you abdicate the floor. Basically, you are not.
Here's the problem with this. Here's the problem with this. Okay, because if you need an argument for everything, then you can't.
I didn't say you need an argument for everything.
Okay, well here's the problem. You claim that you're an agnostic, so you are claiming that you're suspending judgment about the existence or non-existence of God. So I will ask you a very simple question, and I don't need a long response.
This is interesting too, because there's not, people have asked him this before. What's wrong with that? I would suspend. I mean, do I have to have a definitive answer about, say, something like, Bigfoot or something else that you couldn't, I wouldn't be able to exhaustively conclude doesn't exist. And usually their answer to that, at least I think Darth goes with this one too, but JRobin has definitely done it, is, well, no, that's a category error because those are different things, right? The universe doesn't depend on the existence of Bigfoot or some unicorn, but the universe does depend on the existence of God. So you can't be neutral about that. Like, yeah, you can, right? This is the odd thing about he'll start screaming at Sean a little bit again about this whole thing. Like, you have to affirm God when you assert facts. Otherwise, you're not, like you're doing it wrong or something. It's that same kind of cringy, like, well, never mind. I'm getting ahead of myself.
I want to know right now is, are you willing right now, and will you affirm and assert that all of the facts that you invoke, that they necessitate referencing the necessity of God? Will you
Here we go.
affirm that?
We're there.
Well, you could just ask me, do I affirm that all the facts do not necessitate God? And I'm also going to say no, because as I told you, I'm an agnostic.
No,
And
I
that's
asked
not
you a
gonna
question.
make
That's
sense.
not that.
I think he's saying he's an agnostic. Maybe he's just saying agnostic quickly, and I'm not good. Anyway.
It's a completely evasive response to my question. Will you assert right now that all of the facts that you talk about, that come out of your mouth, will you affirm right now that they necessitate referencing the necessity of God? Will you affirm that?
I'm agnostic on that state of affairs.
No. I didn't ask you what you know. I said, will you affirm it?
Yeah, I'm agnostic, so I can't affirm it.
I didn't ask you what you know. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. So, well, if that's the case, then why is Darth not kind of equating knowledge and belief as the same thing? Like, he knows that one is a subset of the other, but at this point, like, he goofed this up about a month ago on one video where he basically said that it was a distinction without a difference, talking about knowledge and difference in this sense. And here he is doing it to Sean.
Okay.
Yes,
I said,
he did.
will you affirm that the facts that you invoke, that they necessitate, will you affirm it?
I can't affirm something I don't know.
So the answer is you will not affirm it. Is that correct?
Yeah. This just seems like a very legalistic way of saying, are you going to acknowledge that God exists? And the agnostic position is, no, I can't assert that or affirm it one way or the other. I'm agnostic. I don't know which one is the case, right? Now, if he tried to say, like, well, what do you believe is most likely? Oh, well, in that case, I might be more inclined to think that there are no gods, but I don't know that we really know one way or the other, right? So, but that's always been kind of the thing. The agnostic position, I think, is just, I think it practically exists to frustrate someone like Darth Dawkins. The atheist position, though, I don't know. That also frustrates him too, because that's generally when he's come at me. I think the last time we talked with Praise I Am's on one of his live streams, and he kept asking me something about, and he was kind of running a slightly more esoteric script on me. But I was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I just kept doubling down on that. You need to define what it is you're actually talking about. Appealing to an ultimate without appealing to without actually saying what that ultimate is, other than the foundation for everything. Well, if you're just saying that it's the foundation for everything we know, that's obviously incomplete. So this thing is right, like, it automatically starts running into some rational problems. So you just reject it as, like, I don't know what you're asking me. Like, the God that you're talking about, you want me to either accept or reject. I don't know that I can do one or the other with it because it's that poorly defined. Now, at least with Sean, he's not getting it. Sean's just like, I don't know that there's a God, so I'm taking the agnostic position. I can't affirm it. I don't know that it's real. I don't know that it exists one way or the other. Darth hates that, though, because the reason that Sean can say he doesn't know is because of God. In Darth's worldview. Now, in Sean's worldview, that's not the case, but Darth doesn't give a shit because he can't do an internal critique.
No, the answer is I don't know.
I didn't ask you what you know. See, this is the problem, Roy, and everyone else that's listening. Sean is a purposely deceptive and
Here we go
deceitful
again with the
individual.
personal
Okay.
attacks.
No, would you not?
Well.
Okay, please don't overtalk me. Otherwise, you're going to get moved back to the audience. Now, this is a completely deceitful response here. He keeps on wanting to claim that he's in a position of neutrality, but this is a falsehood. Because either
I want to know why that is, though. It would be a falsehood in Darth Dawkins' worldview. But if he believes in different worldviews, if he how is this inconsistent with Sean's worldview? Like, this is just another example. I mean, Darth gets himself into this trouble every single time. It doesn't matter if he's talking to somebody who's a hard atheist, an atheist, or an agnostic. He's going to end up at this basic point where he's like, aha, you can't do this because it's violating some aspect of my worldview. And by the way, I think I've told you my worldview is right. Have you heard about my worldview? Have you heard how correct it is? I'm Darth Dawkins, right? Like, this gets no one anywhere. That no matter how often he affirms this, like if you want to go after Sean, Darth, if you're watching this and you want my advice, which you don't, I might as well just be, farting into a coffee can and collecting those for you. You need to show Sean how his worldview is inconsistent within itself, absent that God, right? You can't assert your God, stick it into his worldview, and then say, aha, nothing works in your worldview because your worldview is supposed to work like mine. That's not how an internal critique works. I don't understand why he hasn't figured this out yet. Floyd FP has walked him through this carefully, like with the back of a placemat from Denny's and a big crayon, like, here's how you do it. Just work through it slowly, step by step, little bit at a time. Don't trip. Don't hurt yourself. You'll pull a hammy, be careful, and it doesn't matter. Darth, he rage quits and leaves and then goes back to the Legion of Doom and complains to people about how disgusting, gross, evil, and twisted we all are. And that we're all lying to him.
Facts that one invokes will be either with reference to God or not. Now, the facts that you invoke, I asked you, will you assert right now that they necessitate it? I said, will you assert that? The answer will either be yes, I will affirm that, or no, I will not affirm it. So what is your answer?
Obviously, I don't affirm it. What are you talking about?
Okay.
The goofy thing about this is that little question right there, and this is going to drive him nuts as soon as Sean gets into this. That question, regardless of how Sean asks it, right? If Darth, I've tried telling Darth this. I've tried telling him this on 2 separate occasions at least, I think. And I'm probably not the only one to tell him this. But I said, look, if your worldview is correct, then every time I assert a fact, I am affirming your God. And if I'm doing it implicitly, that's the same as explicitly as far as your worldview is concerned. So why do you need me to acknowledge it? This is the problem with this issue. Like, this is the issue that he ran into with Eddie. It doesn't matter if my epistemology is limited or I think God might not be real. If ontologically our world is lining up more with Darth's than, say, a skeptic's, an agnostic, an atheist, or the hard atheist, where there actually are no gods. His view of reality is closer to the actual reality that we live in. There is some kind of all-powerful being, and everything is dependent on it. Everything is contingent upon it. It is the foundation for all of reality. When you assert a fact and it happens to be true, you're affirming that God exists. You're doing it automatically. You can't help because it's part of the causal connection that starts with that thing ultimately anyway, whether you get it or you don't. I don't understand why Darth fails to reason this. That's one of the best ways to tell somebody, to get somebody who's a skeptic to start thinking about, oh, wait a minute. That's a pretty good point. Like, yeah, it does, like, you might not know that there's a God there and you think that you can't know it and all that kind of stuff. But just by asserting facts about the world around you, you're affirming the God that is responsible for everything that exists anyway. Isn't that neat? Right? And then you can just kind of, slap your hands together and call it a day and be like, hey, let's go, let's go have a cup of coffee or something. You don't have to go this extra step that Darth said. He's just making himself crazy.
So then you, in your mind, you invoke facts by choice without referencing the necessity of God.
I don't know.
No, from your worldview, Darth, he can't. If your worldview is true, he cannot do that. It's impossible for him to do that from your worldview. If he's right, he's also not doing that because there isn't a God that serves as the ultimate foundation. This objection from Darth makes no sense.
I don't know if God exists.
I didn't ask you if you know. I'm not discussing what you know. I'm
Darth is discussing what he's saying. You have to know this in order to get it right, in order to assert it with any accuracy. Otherwise, you could be wrong about it. Being wrong about anything doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In fact, being wrong in this world is dependent on the existence of that creator God if Darth's worldview is true. Being wrong as a human affirms the existence of that God, because the only reason that we're capable of being wrong about anything is because that is something that happens to us as a dynamic within a world created by an ultimate foundation. This is easy. This is so much easier. Darth could be so much more secure in his goofy little precept belief if he would just grasp this basic fact and move on. But he can't, because it's more important for him to yell at Sean and make him look like he's incorrect at every point than to understand his own worldview comprehensively and be secure and confident in it when he presents it.
Pointing out what you do, all right? So you do invoke facts without referencing the necessity of God. Isn't that correct?
No, some facts I invoke might reference God.
No, sir.
I'm just not aware of it because God exists and I don't know.
Or could be. This is how deceitful these people
Well,
are.
look,
Okay?
this is just a bad question.
It's not.
Yeah, I don't. I would actually take issue with Sean's previous answer because, but I think he's starting to get there by that. Like, this is a bad question. I think he's already starting to get to that. Like, yeah, no, you would be affirming that God anytime you said anything about him if that God is automatically real. If all facts are contingent, then every time you state a fact is asserted, then that God is being affirmed right along with the fact being asserted. It's a connection that can't be broken. You can't not do that. And Darth understands this. Like, no, you can't do that. So you have to acknowledge that God's real. And if you don't acknowledge that God somehow in your head, you have to explicitly acknowledge that up front. Otherwise, it somehow breaks the chain. Like, no. Like this it's almost like Darth has this weird idea that I like the entire world is based on an idealism, right? It's a system of idealism, and it all emanates from this great immaterial, eternal, disembodied mind. And all of reality are these thoughts made physical by its power. And in order for you to understand anything about reality, your thoughts have to coincide with its thoughts. And if you're not on the same wavelength, then you can actually misconstrue what's happening in the physical reality of which you are a part. This makes like I don't know if I'm just speculating a little too far afield if Darth's even thought about it that way, but I really don't understand where he thinks this breakdown's occurring.
Not a bad question because it's in the form of the law of excluded middle. Something is either A or not A. I've simply
That doesn't make it a good
value.
question.
Please don't, Roy, would you do me a favor? If he keeps on over talking, can you please move him back to the audience? This is what he does all the time. He just bickers. Okay? He knows what he's doing. This is a form of trolling light. Now,
no, it's not. Like, I love this. I'm not getting the answers I want, and the conversation's not going the way that I'd like it. It must be the other person's fault. Therefore, they're a troll. You, person who runs this channel, do something terrible to that person. Punish them for me by proxy. I'd really appreciate it if you did. And no, he won't, right? Because if Roy doesn't do it fast enough or harshly enough or whatever, it's not going to be good enough. Darth's still going to piss off to one of his other rooms and talk about what how weak and sissified Roy is because he's in there trying to make nice and kiss up to these skeptics.
You invoke facts. I'm talking about what you do. I'm not asking you what you know. I'm asking you what you do. You do invoke facts without the necessity of referencing the necessity of God. Isn't that what you do?
No.
No. No. If your worldview is true, it's not possible.
That's your assertion.
Okay, we're done. Okay.
And to be fair, that is kind of true. But but that's the problem. Darth's asserting something that's not possible in either worldview. If he really believes that Sean is asserting facts without a God, he's like, that's what you're doing, right? Sean is an agnostic, so he's not asserting one way or the other. He in his worldview, one can be neutral about it. There might be a God that exists, and all facts are dependent on it. It might be the case that there is no God and no facts are dependent on any kind of higher power, or maybe there are some facts dependent on some kind of supernatural being that's not the kind of deity that Darth has conjured up. So in that case, is he asserting facts without and it seems to me like this is the claim. If you assert facts without acknowledging God, then what you're doing is you are in your implicit denial, your neglect of referencing God. You are somehow implicitly denying him. And that implicit denial means that you've made an epistemological stance that affects your worldview in a way that makes it just break down. But that doesn't make sense if you're an agnostic, because you don't know if there's something there or not, something missing or not. This, again, this is just one of those things that makes no sense. And from Darth's perspective, like, he can't assert a fact without affirming a God if your worldview is correct. So there's no point in asking that. The point of the precept is to tell them every time you do this, you are affirming God. You can't get out of it. I don't understand this. Like, this is truly bizarre. I don't think that Darth is a presupper. I'm starting to doubt that he gets it.
Roy, this guy is completely dishonest.
I'll
I mean,
okay, let me take over.
This is
Darth.
disgusting.
I got this.
It's just
This is disgusting.
I got this. Okay, Darth,
this is
go
what
ahead,
they're
go ahead.
left with. Okay?
Okay.
Just be lying about what they're doing.
I understand. Darth, go ahead and let me take over.
You know what? Liars are a lot more interesting than people who are pretending to browbeat people with this sort of highfalutin, like, Darth acts like he's got this like Swiss Army theology that's available to him on command, and he can just, like, no one can stop me. I know so much about the Bible and Christianity and theology in general. Like, you're just never going to catch me. And that's like, he's not even consistent within his own worldview. And then he's sitting here condemning others as liars and what's this? It's deceivers, drunkards, delinquents, and dunces. Usually, that's the four categories most people end up in, because they don't know, or are pretty sure that it's the opposite of whatever Darth is talking about. Darth is sure, but then needs you to acknowledge it, otherwise it ceases to be. Now I'm being uncharitable. That's not what he's saying, but still, like, you need to acknowledge Darth's worldview, and you need to acknowledge it for yourself. Otherwise, I don't even know how you wake up in the morning. How do you even put pants on? 5 legs at a time. I mean, it might as well be. What?
Go ahead and make a sandwich or something. Help yourself out.
Roy had sandwich. Oh no, okay, figure of speech. I was gonna say, wait a minute. These Clubhouse rooms have sandwiches offered sometimes. I'm going to the wrong ones.
I'm going to go ahead and let the room do what I said earlier. I don't know Sean. I do know what Darth has said. I get it, but I need to know Sean for myself, because maybe Sean might not treat me like he treats Darth, simply because I'm not Darth. So if someone has anything as far as commentary, a question for Sean, right now it's going to be the Sean show for a bit, because I want to really get to know Sean, and I want Sean to feel, that he's being treated fairly here. And so Sean, let me say this. When Darth gave you a question, you did your best. I believe. That's what I'm going to believe. If you didn't, then shame on you. But I do believe you did your best to answer him the way that you could or thought you should answer him. And finally, you admitted what he was looking for, and I applaud you for that. So thank you. So does anybody have anything for Sean at this time, or some commentary, anything at all?
Yeah.
And let's go for it. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, Sean, Darth also, there's another question that Darth asked you that has not been answered. And that was, what was your non-question begging argument for the falsity of God?
Yeah, sure. I can give you a non-question begging argument.
Yeah, go ahead. A non-question begging argument for the falsity of God. Let's hear it.
I like that JRobin has the capacity to clear his throat in an asshole-ish way, if asshole-ish is an effective adjective here. I think you know what I mean. Like, That's a real skill. I think there might be a gene for that. I don't know if you can learn that, but he has the ability to be condescending and patronizing when he clears his throat. Like the evil dean in those 80s college movies, or like the evil businessman in other 80s movies. Just the kind of stuck up waspy prick.
And you cannot presuppose that facts don't exist without God, because then that would be question begging, right? So let's hear your non-question begging argument for the falsity of God.
I can't suppose that facts don't exist without God. Why would
No,
I do that?
because listen. If your criteria for an argument for the existence of God when we're presenting it is that we cannot suppose, when we present facts, that they are indicative, revelatory, and dependent upon God, then you cannot do the same on your end. You cannot presuppose that the facts that you're asserting, when the argument that you're going to give, exists without reference to God. Anything that is doing that would be question begging for your position, which is that God doesn't exist.
How?
So, what is your non-question begging argument for the falsity of God?
Yeah, sure. So,
hang on. I hadn't actually heard that before. I'm going to wind that back a little bit and listen to this gibberish.
That the facts that you're asserting and dependent, we cannot suppose. If your criteria for an argument for the existence of God when we're presenting it is that we cannot suppose, when we present facts, that they are indicative, revelatory, and dependent upon God, then you cannot do the same on your end. You cannot presuppose that the facts that you're asserting, when the argument that you're going to give, exists without reference to God. Anything that is doing that would be question begging for your position, which is that God doesn't exist.
I really don't understand what he's talking about.
So, what is your non-question begging argument for the falsity of God?
Yeah, sure. So, there's a number of different arguments that I could make.
Let's hear one. Your best one. Let's hear it now.
Ooh.
Jay,
well, I'm not
Jay,
sure what
you
my
know,
best
hold
one
on,
is.
hold on, Sean. Jay, we don't need that attitude. I just want to say, because Sean's playing the game as best as he can, as far as I'm concerned. I want to get.
I was listening to this entire conversation, and Sean is completely. I mean, he's making me sick to my stomach, and so I want to get an answer to this question. I want to get an answer to this question.
You don't.
Okay, so props to Roy for modding this well. I like the fact that he called him to the carpet. Robin's there, like, let's hear it now. Like, look, you need to, set your motherfucker to receive. You are not the boss of people, JRobin. You are like just get that through your head. You are not the boss of people just because you're on Clubhouse. Like the the fucking grapes this kid thinks he has. I mean, does he walk bow-legged? I mean, is he that convinced that he's that, I really don't get this at all. So he's sick to his stomach from what he's heard from Sean for reasons that I don't understand. I really don't, because I haven't heard anything from Sean that I haven't heard from. Sean hasn't been aggressive in this, other than to push back on some of Darth's, belly aching and interruptions. But now JRobin's in here, not so much the white knight for Darth, but to like express to bin. I don't know what you would call this. It's not really like a sin eater, but what is a person that shows up and does all the emoting for you? Like I have to be the person that's stoic and measured and reserved, but this person's going to lose it on my opponent for me, so I can vicariously, live through his belly aching and his derision. Jesus Christ, what a mess. Like, JRobin's just
Don't have to be here. All I'm saying is cut the attitude. That's all.
All right. Sean, what is your non-question begging argument for the falsity of God? And you cannot presuppose that the facts that you're going to assert do not exist indicatively of God. It's your one argument, your best one.
What? So you have to give a non-question begging argument for the non-existence of God, and you can't assert that your facts are indicative of God. Okay. From your worldview, JRobin, that is not possible. And JRobin is just going to hold Sean to the standard of his own worldview, not Sean's word, JRobin's worldview, where all facts have to assert the existence of a God, because all facts are contingent upon that God. We would have no facts without that God. So this question that he's asking, like, I want a non-question begging answer for what substantiates these facts. Okay, so you want an appeal to coherentism without any of the problems of coherentism, or you would like an explanation that uses infinitism and doesn't have any of the problems of infinitism. Like, just solve that for me, Sean. And then when you fail to do that, I'm going to go right back and say foundationalism is the only way. And yeah, maybe some philosophers out there thought that there's problems with foundationalism, but as a Christian, those problems don't exist. They're solved. I win. Great work, JRobin. Great work. It's no wonder you're nauseated when you talk to people. I would be too. I'd be having a panic attack every day if I was getting through life with this little common sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure what my best one is, right? But just one that jumps to mind as being compelling for me is if I look at the world and there's the possibility that God exists.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt that. I'll probably bounce that back a couple seconds. Michael said, I was in the Ask a Christian room the other day with all the usual suspects. It was funny. Roy, quote unquote, strong-armed DD, and he got all pissy. Did he quit? Did he quit and take off, I wonder? Or did he actually take correction and stick around? Or do what he did here with JRobin? Oh, come on, Roy. Probably went back to his Pringles can. All right, let's wind this back a little bit.
If I look at the world and there's the possibility that God exists, and there's also the possibility that God does not exist. And these are two options that I look at in the world. And I just sort of tally up all the possible explanations for why the world is the way that it is, and I look at it whether God exists or whether God doesn't exist. There is no relevant data that fails to explain the world at least as well as the God worldview does.
Okay, does that fact that you just asserted, does that fact exist with dependence upon?
No.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry, Sean. Everything that you said doesn't mean anything to JRobin, because JRobin is going to go back and say, well, are you saying something that doesn't assert the existence of my God? Then you're wrong. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess you're right. There's just JRobin's way or no way at all.
So then you just presuppose the falsity of God. So you just question back.
No,
So do you have a
I
non-question
said
begging
from
argument
the
for the
outset
falsity
of
of
the
God?
argument that we assume
No,
that
listen,
it's possible
listen, Sean, listen. You just made an accusation, and you do so in all the other sophist atheists. They do this all the time. They will ask you for a question begging argument, or sorry, a non-question begging argument. And in doing so, they're asking the Christian or whoever's going to present the argument for God that they cannot, in their worldview, assume that God exists whenever they're presenting facts about the world, which is an absurd thing to ask somebody to do. So,
well, that's absurd from your worldview, because because in your worldview it's posited as being necessary, but from another worldview it's not. So if you believe in the existence of other worldviews, you need to acknowledge that that's a possibility, and you need to take steps to figure out why that's irrational. You can't just jump back into your worldview and say, you know what, because your position, whatever you're talking about, is inconsistent from my worldview framework, it doesn't work in yours. You don't get to do that, JRobin. That's fucked up. I mean, I know that's kind of your bag, but still, that's fucked up. You deserve to be sick to your stomach. You should quit being so lazy about this kind of shit.
I'm going to shove your face in the absurdity of your own question and the absurdity of your own charges. Okay.
What charges? He's an agnostic. What the shit is JRobin even talking about here? This is absolutely weird.
If you require that somebody who is going to present an argument for God cannot present these facts with the assumption or under the worldview where God is going to be that which is the ultimate, and that thing that all these facts depend upon, then you cannot do the same on your end either. Which means that when you're asserting facts, any fact, X, Y, Z, all of those facts individually and collectively, they cannot exist in your worldview, or they cannot exist in your argument in a world where they are not dependent upon God.
Why? Why can't they? Like, I understand why they won't work in JRobin's worldview or Darth Dawkins' worldview. They won't work by definition. But why won't they work in Sean's worldview? And I bet you anything, JRobin, if he gets asked that question or a question similar to it, he's going to say because it doesn't work. He's not going to say because it doesn't work in mine, but he's going to appeal to the existence, like he just did. You can't talk about facts without talking about God. That's JRobin's worldview. I don't like, these guys need to be called out on this repeatedly. Like, if you're gonna come at me with this whole worldview versus worldview bullshit, then you need to keep those straight. You need to understand that there's two different worldviews here and know what the hell you're talking about. Don't come at this shit carrying this in where you know the line. Like, these guys say the quiet parts out loud and then forget this other stuff they were supposed, like, it's like they forget the ta-da or the abracadabra when they're supposed to unveil the turn that turns the trick, and like, oh my God, you got me. Oh, you're so clever, and it's so imbued with the Holy Spirit and the knowledge of Jesus. I had no idea. I'm such an idiot. How could I deny your Christian God all this time? Like, what the fuck are you trying to do here? Like, if you believe that there's separate worldviews, then you have to be consistent about how you're criticizing them. You can't criticize an outsider's worldview with your worldview and pretend in any way that you're being honest about it. Now, if your position is there are no other worldviews, then at some point you need to actually explicitly announce that, or get that person to that using whatever cockeyed Socratic method you're attempting to pull off here. But at some point, JRobin and Darth Dawkins got so hysterical and so lazy about this that they forget to take the person down that path. You're supposed to lead them to the path where they acknowledge there are no other worldviews. There's just the one, and in that one, it is irrational to deny the God, which is the foundation for all facts, which are contingent upon it as the ultimate foundation. That would then kind of make sense. But if you're still haven't gotten them to that point and they're still operating from the position that they think that they have, which is their own worldview, what you're doing makes no fucking sense. Like, there's supposed to be something to there's a systematic theology, and it requires a systematic methodology. And JRobin and Darth Dawkins are too sloppy, drunk, creepy, or weird to even track that. They just crib too much of the shit from bad websites and crap sermons from like Jeff Durbin or whatever, borderline Christian Nazi that they listen to every weekend to get themselves jacked up on hate and atheists, to even be able to keep track of this shit anymore. These guys should be kicked out of these fucking rooms, especially from other Christians. These guys don't bring anything to the table anymore. They're just lol cows now.
Because if that was the case, you're arguing for the falsity of God. So then you can't assume that facts exist where God doesn't exist either, right? Because then you're just arguing in a circle according to you, right? So I want to hear an argument where you do not presuppose the falsity of God when you're asserting these facts, because you just presented an argument and I asked you, does this fact exist with dependence upon God? You said no. So let's hear an argument that's non-question begging, where you do not first presuppose the falsity of God. And let's see if you're a rational individual who can present a rational argument for your atheism. So the first argument was a fail. Do you have a second argument you can give?
I think if you stay within the framework of my argument instead of going outside of it and asking me whether the facts that I invoke are necessary to God or whatever, then you won't get confused,
Sean,
and think that I'm presupposed. No, don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. I let you finish, right? So let me finish. Then you won't.
Like, even his noises, even the noises that he makes are punchable. Just punchable.
Get confused and think that I'm begging the question that God doesn't exist. At the outset, I'm saying that it's possible that God exists. And I'm not even saying in the conclusion of my argument is a defeater for the existence of God simpliciter. I'm not saying that it's completely rules out any logical possibility of the existence of God. What I'm saying is that if the existence of God becomes superfluous in my worldview, i.e., all the things that I look at in the world have causal, natural explanations, and there's no need to posit a God, and probably therefore God doesn't exist. Doesn't mean that God doesn't exist,
Sean.
period.
Yeah, you're not.
And there's
listening.
nothing in there.
There are at least
Yeah, but they're not going to accept that. They're not going to accept that position from Sean, and it'll be interesting because now Darth is trying to jump back in again. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if I made it this far last time I started listening to this. Which one will prevail? I think Jay will cower to Darth. He'll come to heel. And yeah, exactly, Doubting Thomas. The only point of this bullshit is to shut the mouths of the non-believers, not logic or conversion to Christianity. Yep. Yeah, it's about drawing lines in the sand and getting ready for when Jesus comes back. Darth and JRobin get to go to heaven, and all you assholes are going to burn in hell. You will make a wonderful addition to the fire that will keep me warm in my heavenly palace. I'm almost certain Darth Dawkins feels that way. I know Rebuke and Reprove thinks that way. He's actually talked about being able to sit on the edge of the fire of hell and laugh while sinners burn. He's looking forward to it. He's lined up, front row tickets and everything.
There
Jay,
are at
let me
least two
just
or
make a
three
comment,
issues
Jay.
that I
Jay,
yeah.
let me just make a comment. Again, this is the deceptive nature of the response. He's trying to represent himself as being neutral. This is what the vast majority of unbelievers try to promulgate, right? They're not neutral. This is a false claim, right? Just like they
This
walk
is
into a pawn
even
shop and
even
they want to
people who
say,
make arguments
let
for
me
the
finish.
existence of
Let me
God and who are
finish.
true
Okay.
believers
He's already admitted
accept what
that
I'm
the
saying.
facts that okay, would we silence Sean here? This is what he does, right? He's already admitted that he invokes facts without the necessity of referencing the necessity of God. This is what he does. So
what? From his worldview, he can do that. Why is that a problem within his worldview? I've only heard from Darth and from JRobin why that's a problem within their worldview, within their structure. Like, if you guys don't like this thing, Darth and JRobin and Redefine Living, because he does the same kind of thing. If you don't like this position, then don't let people think that they have their own worldview. You have to get people onto the same playing field as this. But these guys have talked about this all like, well, in your worldview, and then there's my worldview. No, there isn't. Not from this Christian perspective. This blinkered perspective is if there is only one God and there is only one foundation for absolutely everything, then there is only one worldview. Right? Christians don't, non-believers don't have a separate worldview. So knock that shit off right then and there. And these guys would be so much better if they would just just get rid of that. And then get the person to acknowledge, look, when you affirm facts as a Christian, from the Christian perspective, when you assert facts, you're affirming the existence of God. You're just automatically doing it. Our subjective experience itself is part of the general revelation of God, right? But as Sean said at the beginning of this, those kinds of statements are statements of faith. And there's nothing wrong with making statements of faith. But what these guys want to do is say, no, it's actually a rational statement, and I bet you I can ground it in an argument. But before I ground it in a super convincing argument that you will never be able to escape. I mean, the rationality and just the inescapable logic of it will hit you in the face like a like a bullet. You need to come up with an argument that establishes why that God can't exist. Go, you first. What? Why is that fucking necessary? As a Christian, that is not what you want to do. You do not put the ball in the other person's court because there isn't any other court other than the Christian worldview. The only court that you're at play on is the one God gave us all. If you're a true believing Christian, that's the point that you get to. If they don't like that or they don't acknowledge it, the only thing you can do at that point is say that you'll pray for them, and hopefully the Holy Spirit will regenerate their heart and bring them into that realization over time. That's it. That's where it stops. This pathetic play where people can just scrunch up their face and squeeze really hard and think their way to Jesus is fucking blasphemy. That's blasphemy. Because it's not about faith. It's about thinking right and getting rewarded right. It's about cheating God. If you think right and you get the right thoughts the right way and line it up, you get to go into heaven because you figured out the path through the hedge maze, not because you dropped to your knees and asked God to forgive you and his Holy Spirit, the power of the Holy Spirit, changed your heart. I don't know why Darth and JRobin are running from the power of their faith. It's a better position than this bullshit they keep chumming out on people online.
he will then say, but I'm not saying God doesn't exist. I'm saying God possibly exists. Well, first of all, this is a contradiction in terms. He's saying two things. On the one hand, he's saying, I'm not making a judgment about the existence or not existence of God, but he has made a judgment about God in that he invokes facts without the necessity of referencing the necessity of God.
That's stupid, Darth. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying as an agnostic is that if it's the case that that God doesn't exist, then yes, when he asserts a fact, it does so without referencing God because there is no God upon which facts are contingent. But if it's the case that there is a God and it's an ultimate foundation from which all facts are contingent, then when he asserts those facts, he automatically is asserting the identity that God. He can't help but do that. Now, I don't think that was exactly Sean's argument, but that's I'm helping. I'm coloring in for some of the things that Sean's doing, right? But from an agnostic position, I don't think that's an objectionable way to frame that, right? This other point that Darth makes, you're not referencing the necessity of referencing God. The necessity of referencing is the problem here. Why is there a necessity for referencing God? The fact already references God, and if that God exists and exists in the way that Darth is defined, then it is necessary, and asserting the fact necessarily references God because the fact does. Why do I have to reference it necessarily? Why does that cause a breakdown in things? Darth cannot explain that. He cannot answer that question. I have asked him that. He ran. And he will continue to run from that. So if you're ever wondering about that, ask him what he's talking about. The necessity of the fact, if it exists, fine. The necessity of referencing God when referencing the fact. He has not established why that's a thing, why that's necessary. And he can't.
God. This is what he does. And when we point out what he does do, that he does invoke facts without referencing the necessity of God, what he does.
I think
he
you're
then
confused.
says, well, okay, Roy, can we
Classic. That is an understatement, Sean, but perfectly well said. I think you're confused. Oh, definitely.
keep moving back to audience or mute?
Yeah,
Thank you.
not yet, Darth. Not yet. Okay. So does
Okay.
anybody else have anything?
Can I just
for
finish?
Sean?
Can I finish?
Okay.
So
what listen,
he's doing.
Darth, hold on. There's other people that just came on stage. You said, can I move them to the audience? I said no. That means you're finished, at least for now. Let me go around the horn and we'll get back
Yeah,
to you.
can you let Darth finish what he was saying?
Okay.
Who the hell is Pork?
Go ahead, Darth.
Yeah, what we have here.
Okay, so when Roy was actually doing pretty good before, when he was modding the shit out of his own channel, then he just kind of caves there. He's like, "No, you're done." Blah blah. Pork pipes up and is like, "Hey, can you let Darth finish that question? Can I get that question out again?" And he's like, "Okay, go ahead." All that shit that I just told you. No, forget that. Never mind. Go ahead. Continue trying to bulldoze, Sean.
Here is absolute verbal gymnastics and deception. On the one hand, he will admit, like pulling teeth, that he invokes facts without referencing the necessity of God. This is what he does. But then he wants to turn right around and says, "Oh, I don't believe either. I don't know either." It is the same pseudo claim that he's suspending judgment, but he hasn't suspended judgment. What he has decided that facts can be invoked without the necessity of referencing the necessity of God.
And they can, because that's just his epistemology. It doesn't change ontology. It doesn't change what actually is. There's no problem with him doing that. Just like I said before, if his worldview, if it's true, like he's in the agnostic position, right? If there's a being like that, then when he asserts facts, that sort of indirectly implies the existence of that God. It has to, right? By definition. If that God isn't there, then he's not asserting that God because there isn't a God to reference at that point, right? But this makes no sense. And Darth should know better than this because another great example of this, well, I reference Allah when I reference facts, so that gets me to the same place. People have brought this up before, I believe, with Darth, and I'm not exactly sure how he responds to that. I believe it's necessary to reference, Shabbat, whatever God I decide, and I could say it has the same kinds of things. It's transcendent. It's an omni-God. It's an ultimate foundation, disembodied mind that loves me and is personal, can have relations with me, and all this other kind of stuff. My God's even better because it has sexual relations with its believers. Boom. So upgrade. So if I assert the necessity of referencing that God when I reference facts, okay, could I be wrong about that God? Is there a necessity for me to reference that God when I reference facts? It turns out that there is a God. It's not Shabbat, the one that she who fucks all her believers, but no, it's actually Yahweh. I was wrong all along. It turns out the Bible was true. It was Yahweh. Okay. So what difference did it make if I referenced it? This makes no sense. That Darth is trying to make this like, no. If you want to make any points with me, you got to be I mean, I don't understand why he doesn't tell people like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. I was going to ask you. I wanted to ask you what you thought of that new the new Batman movie that came out. But first, I don't want to know your opinion if you're not a Christian, because I'm pretty sure if you're not a Christian, then you could like it for all sorts of reasons that I won't understand. So just let me know that first, and then if you are a Christian, okay, let's talk about the Batman.
So he's continuing this charade that he's suspending judgment, and he's not. He's not suspending judgment. If he believed that it was necessary to reference the necessity of God, then he would say so. But because he does not believe it is necessary to reference the necessity of God, that is what he does. He doesn't do it. So what he does do reveals to us what his belief state is. But then he turns right around and says, well, I don't believe either. But you see, your actions speak louder than your words. What you
Yeah, they do. So if he's capable of asserting a fact and not getting God involved in it, but you can't help but do that, you're a God-bothering sociopath. There's something weird about you, Darth, where you can't let epistemology, you can't stop epistemology from getting involved in ontology. Like, this person has to be right about the central thing, otherwise they're just getting everything wrong. What there's the idea that this central claim, at the heart of everything that he's trying to do, you have to choose one or the other. There is a God, or there isn't a God, and you have to pick that side beforehand. And if you're just trying to do the agnostic thing and say, well, maybe there isn't, maybe there isn't, maybe when I assert facts it does, maybe when I assert facts it doesn't, well, Darth's no, because if you don't choose, then when you reference those facts, regardless of whether or not Darth's worldview is true or something else is the fact, then you're denying it. And then so what? What follows from that? I asked Darth and JRobin. Does that mean they can't? If can Darth and JRobin trust a cancer diagnosis from a doctor that is an atheist? I'm sure they would say yes. Don't be ridiculous. Of course I can. The doctor has training and knows how to do this, this, and this. But ultimately, the foundation of it is they have to, like, no, nope, because that person has a whole background of knowledge built up on top of a bunch of other knowledge that's been built up over time. And what Darth would have us believe as skeptics is that we can't get off the ground without acknowledging the truth of God's existence. Or for the purposes of this argument, what we have to do is say that, you know what, I'm a hard atheist, and every time I assert a fact, I assert it with, yes, the color of my car is red, and God doesn't exist. I bought some groceries because God doesn't exist. Like, I really don't understand why Darth and JRobin are hung up on this. This is a loser argument. It has been for a long time. It's so much better the other way. And if they're watching, watch my video, rewind this another 20, 30 minutes when I go on a long rant about it. There's a better way to do precept.
do, what you choose to do, is reflective of what you believe. You do invoke facts without referencing the necessity of God. But then you turn.
Yeah, didn't Darth say earlier that he was not asking Jeff what Jeff believed? Yeah, he was trying to point out to Jeff in that previous video? Yeah, I think he was. I don't know if he was trying to get Jeff into the same kind of thing he's trying to do with Sean here, where it's like, no, it's about the actions that you take here, and what you're trying to do is use this stance where you can assert facts all day long and not actually make a and not have a position on whether or not a God exists or not. It's yeah, don't know.
Turn right around and say, but I leave God as an open, that the existence and non-existence of God is an open question. But it's not an open question. That claim that you're making is about as real as somebody walking into a pawn shop and says, I want to sell you this Civil War memorabilia. And the pawn shop owner says, no, this is a counterfeit. You're making a counterfeit claim when you claim that you're neutral or suspending judgment. And we know this is a counterfeit claim by what you do. You do invoke facts without referencing the necessity of God. So what you do contradicts your claim as to what your position is. And I'm done.
First thing I
Well, you've been done, Darth.
want to say
Can I
is,
respond?
Sean, thank you very much for waiting your turn. I have to say that that I have to commend that.
Oh yeah. If you meant Sean, then yeah, Michael. Earlier on, yeah, he wasn't talking about so much what he believed or what he was talking about either what he knew, and then he was talking about what he does. And now he's kind of, I think he's gone with that last rant. He'd kind of gone back to that position. But again, it still doesn't. He still can't demonstrate why it's the case that somebody who's agnostic can't be neutral epistemologically about something, right? Like, I mean, the comment that Stupid Horror Energy left here kind of sums it up well. It is possible to not know everything that logically follows from what you know. Alex Malpass wrote a great piece on this. It was in one of his blog things. He was talking about there's or maybe it was in a video that I saw. He was one of many guests on there, but he was talking about essentially being given a mathematical problem that you can't solve. You know all of the principles necessary for it mathematically. You have all the mathematical tools, formulas, everything else like that necessary to solve it, but nobody's been able to solve it, right? So just because you have everything in place to get you to the conclusion doesn't mean you have the conclusion. I think Darth and JRobin have a real problem with that.
That was amazing to hear you do that. Okay, so I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and yeah, I commend where commendation is due. So Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I hear where Darth is coming from. I'm not. I don't think I'm being duplicitous or anything when I say that I don't know if certain. I don't. You're right. I don't. I admit that I don't think that facts are invoked necessarily reference God or anything. But I don't think you want to say that whether anything fact that I invoke necessitates God or not falsifies the existence of God, or that any claim that you make necessarily proves the existence of God, right? Because that would sort of go outside our abilities, right? So it's not really relevant. Like, yeah, I'm not. And I didn't say I didn't pass judgment either. Like, yeah, I am on the side of the fence that I don't think that I lean towards God doesn't exist. I'm just.
It's a sad world we live in. I agree, Joseph Cano. I would say you're welcome, but it's a sad state of affairs. I agree.
Saying that I don't say that it's impossible that God exists, and I don't think that there's an argument either way that can falsify or prove the existence of God. There are arguments that we can render. There are arguments that we can render that are in support of one position or another, and that's all that I'm offering. And that's all that's on offer in the realm of philosophical discourse, whether we argue for or against God. So there's lots of compelling arguments, as I said, lots of compelling non-question begging arguments for the existence of God that aren't going to necessarily falsify, or that aren't necessarily going to prove that God exists.
This is what we call a wall of words.
Okay, wait a second. Darth,
specifically address what I said.
It's a wall of words if you didn't listen to what he said. Like that is like that's peak Darth lack of charity right there. Well, this is what we call a wall of words. First of all, using the royal we when you talk about yourself is a kind of like passive aggressive self-aggrandizement, right? Like I'm going to use the royal we, like I've got consensus behind me, right? Like that just smacks of impotent rage. Um, so it, yeah, let's go on from here because I'm sure this isn't going to get much better. Darth is clearly upset that Roy had him wait all that time for Sean to actually finish his sentences.
Darth, no, you're done.
Can I go?
Now. Okay.
Go.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So on the Christian worldview, God created the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. So God is the final reference point. That means that all facts that are invoked are going to stand in relation, either directly or indirectly, from God. So
Redefine Living is bringing up, well, God says this here, and he's talking about essentially in some Genesis accounts. Well, all right, let's say that that's true. That's Yahweh, not Jesus. So try again.
when you reject that, or you do not acknowledge God as the final reference point, then you have at the very least implicitly denied God. Now,
See, I love this when these guys attempt, like Redefine Living here, and he's something of a chowder brain. If you're going to invoke the Bible, you need to be really damn careful about what you're doing. And you can always tell a Christian invoking the Christian Bible because they just, like Christians have done since they began. It's one of the reasons I find the religions particularly obnoxious. They just help themselves to the Hebrew Bible and lots of Hebrew tradition, rip out the shit that they don't want, and that way, and they have been able to kind of co-opt certain parts of the message in their own. So if you're talking, but not all the time, right? So when God commands the slaughter of the Amalekites, right? That's Yahweh, Old Testament God, Hebrew tradition, yada yada yada, not Jesus. But when they're talking about Jesus, the God they believe in, the necessary Savior, and all that kind of stuff, being the one and only, the Alpha, the Omega, the ultimate foundation, yada yada yada, I can go as a Christian. One can bounce back to Genesis and say, well, it says right here that this is how things work, and so you have to take it upon faith. Bingo, bango, bongo. Jesus wins. Neat trick. Right? Like it's not cool when Pine Creek says Jesus ordered the Hebrews to go slaughter the Amalekites. Like that's a dirty trick, Pine Creek, or should I say Pine Snake? But it's perfectly okay to say, oh, well, Jesus is the same God as the one in Genesis. How? Right? So this is an interesting claim for any Christian to make, right? Like, hey, well, it says in Genesis or it says in Isaiah that God has these properties. Yeah, those writers are talking about Yahweh, not Jesus. So talk amongst yourselves and come back at us when you got that sorted.
Your own criteria was that that a worldview, I suppose, needs to be justified. That's why you're asking for a justification for the biblical worldview. But I'm wondering if you can meet your own criteria. There is no neutral ground. We are presupposing the truth of God, and you are presupposing the truth of not God. And that's why you're asking for evidence. So I'm wondering.
Actually, Redefine hasn't been paying attention. Sean's not presupposing the truth of either of those positions as an agnostic. He's saying either could be the case. I don't know.
If you can meet your own criteria and give us a rational explanation of how you came to the conclusion that your not God world is actual.
He doesn't have a not God world. You are thrusting that onto him and ignoring that he is an agnostic. That was what he told you that he was. And Redefine Living is just like the daisy chain that Jack Burton was nice enough to lay out in the comments early towards the beginning of like who was a discount who. I think it starts with Paul, then Calvin, then Van Til, then Bonson, then Darth Dawkins, then JRobin, and then a baying goat, and then Redefine Living. That's kind of the order that this should go in.
Yeah, I think there's
non-question.
Yeah, I think there's considerations from the logical problem of evil. I think that's very difficult for a an omnibenevolent God. I think there's logical problems with the concepts of omnipotence and omniscience.
Can you just do
I
one
think
before you do a Gish Gallop? So I'd like.
That's not a Gish Gallop, you weirdo. Look, man, these Redefine Living. I mean, it's like someone made a potato sentient, gave it the ability to speak. He's not Gish Galloping. He's literally giving like examples of different arguments that are evidence or motivations for people to accept a not God world. I'm surprised that Sean didn't push back up and like I'm an agnostic. I don't have a not God world. Sean is actually being quite charitable with him in that he's basically he's sort of ceded that point. Okay. As far as they're concerned, these guys think that agnostics are not God worldview types. So Sean's operating from that. I wouldn't have given that up. I mean, like, no. I think that's one of the reasons why Randolph Richardson drives Darth crazy whenever they have conversations, because Randolph usually does not give that up.
I would like to address your assertion that somehow there's a problem with evil. You're going to need to show, in order to substantiate that, you're going to need to show that somehow this problem of evil, or the evil that God allows, somehow overwhelms his overall plan of goodness and salvation. Are you able to do that?
I think so, yeah.
So you're omniscient, and you can know that the evil that God allows is going to overwhelm his plan of salvation and goodness. You're able to do that?
No, I can't falsify the possibility that God has a moral reason that I'm unaware of.
Okay, then you don't have
that
an
allows the
argument
existence of
ultimately.
evil. Well, look, let me finish, right? And maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from. I don't have an argument that falsifies the possibility that God has a moral reason for allowing evil to exist in the world. I just have an argument that goes against the probability that God has a moral reason that I would rationally accept.
Yeah, so you have an argument that God has somehow hurt your feelings, but it doesn't follow from that God is false. So
when did Sean say anything about God hurting his feelings? Way to project there, Redefine. That's weird. I love how quickly these guys want to do this. They automatically, like, you're either lying about God or you're angry at him. Which one is it, skeptic? Come at me. I'll figure you out. Or, well, like, I'll make you run away screaming, or I'll make you cry on the couch and accept Jesus. Like, these guys really have delusions of grandeur.
do you have another argument?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Okay, so you said, you brought up the problem of evil as if it is somehow a defeater, but as upon closer look, it turns out it was just a complaint. Do you have a defeater?
No, I never said it was a defeat. It's problematic for me if it's not.
And it's not really a defeater. The issue with it depends on which problem of evil gets discussed, right? If it's the logical problem of evil and you're trying to use it as a way of kind of, I think the logical problem of evil is an effective argument when you're trying to do a disproof of the omnibenevolence aspect of the Abrahamic God. If you don't want to get into the philosophical weeds there, I think the other side of that would be more like the evidential problem of suffering. Probably a better way to put it, is probably the one most likely to lead people away from a belief in God, or at least the kind of God that Christians affirm exists, because there is a problem with the amount, not of some kind of esoteric evil, or you can end up getting into a semantic game trying to define what one means by evil, suffering or unpleasantness or pain or any of that other kind of stuff. But suffering for any living thing, not just humans, but and what we would call unnecessary suffering, or sort of just excessive suffering, the amount of it, the scope of it, and the amount of it, quality and quantity of the suffering that's in this world, given the existence of a God. And you're still kind of hitting the same thing, whether or not that God's omnibenevolent or not. But if it's morally perfect, that's an issue for people that drives doubt. I think if you define God as something less than powerful, less than all powerful and less than morally perfect, it's not as much of an issue. But those properties are sort of necessary for other things that Christians want to assert, like the certainty that their God exists. So they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. so to speak.
Not problematic for you, then there's no problem.
Yeah, it's
Answer the
not
question, please.
problematic for me. So do you have so again?
Yeah, so
the
it's just
question
not
that's been asked,
convincing to
how
you.
is it that God is false?
No, I no, God isn't false. It's just not an argument that would be convincing to you.
Yeah, can I ask you one more question?
Go ahead.
Why should arguments be logical?
That
They shouldn't redefine. Seriously.
that's just a necessary like precondition for.
Can you answer that without begging the question, sir? You've just begged the question by giving me a logical response.
No, I explained this earlier that rule circularity is needed in order to establish logical grounds.
Yeah, my last question. Do you have a justification that is not arbitrary as to why the Christian cannot first presuppose God?
Yeah, because
why
that's
you
going to
will
go beyond.
Yeah, I'm
that's going to violate.
Why you will arbitrarily allow some circular arguments, but not others?
Yeah, because that's going to violate the.
Because not all circularity is created equal. Like there's a difference between a tautology and begging the question. Redefine Living does not know that difference, so it's probably not important to him.
The law of parsimony, right? So we can both agree that we can both reason and use logic.
We don't.
But we
both
can't
agree, though, sir. We disagree, and that's the problem.
But that's gonna bar.
You haven't been able to provide a reason that's more than just an arbitrary opinion. You can arbitrarily select which arguments that are circular that you will allow. So we will just.
I love this. Like, so now, oh, well, any of these claims of circularity are just arbitrary coming. Like, this is coming from people like, in this particular clique, somebody like Darth Dawkins, who even had to be shown what affirming the consequent was multiple times and never acknowledged that he was getting it wrong. And then eventually started acting as if he caught on to it and then would make excuses for why he was reframing it. Because he could, or he could make great arguments even if he was affirming the consequent. It's fucking hilarious. So redefine. I mean, he might as well just be, making those armpit noises with the palm of his hand, kind of thing. Yeah, from Perfect. Any argument that involves the problem of evil is going to be putting forward the premise that evil cannot accomplish any unique function. I have no idea how one would go about establishing that. I wouldn't compare Precept to McDonald's. Precept is more like a mom and pop burger joint going out of business due to failing health standards. Yeah. That's true. Say what you will about McDonald's, but they can consistently put out a lot of product without poisoning the populace. I wouldn't trust any of these clowns to do that. So,
disagree.
Well, if you think that logic is, well, I already explained why. There's certain logical axioms that it's necessary that we agree on in order to discuss whether 2 + 2 = 4, or whether an apple is an apple and not an orange. And if you disagree on that, then you're right. We're not able to discuss logically because you don't accept the axioms of logic.
So again, do you have an argument that is not arbitrary or fallacious?
He just gave one as an example. So what in the hell is going on here, Redefine? Like, this is sad, right? If these guys had stuck to the original issue of Precept, which is, look, it's not the fact that you can't know things, it's that you can't account for how you know things. They would be in such a better position than any of this shit. And Redefine Living is way out in on some thin ice on this thing because he doesn't know how to swim, probably doesn't understand how ice works either.
To show how God doesn't exist or emotional.
Yeah, I don't think any argument I've given is arbitrary or fallacious, unless you want to show me what the fallacy was.
I've already done that.
But you just said that
he believes that he's shown that Sean's arguments are arbitrary and fallacious. How? These guys have made the claim that Sean is making arbitrary arguments or making fallacious claims, but they haven't demonstrated that Sean has done that once. They just keep insisting that he has.
The logic itself is fallacious. You didn't say.
So your problem of evil was emotional. Okay. Your position.
You didn't even hear what my argument was.
Hold on.
Problem of evil.
Well, yeah, I did. I said you're going to have to show that the evil that God allows somehow overwhelms his overall plan of salvation and goodness, and you're not going to be able to do that. So ultimately you just have an emotional complaint. Your arbitrary argument was that some circular, hold on, I'm almost done. Your arbitrary argument was that some circular arguments will be valid and some won't. And so we disagree on there too. So do you have anything for us today?
Well, yeah, that's fine. Look, an argument is not going to convince everybody, right? That's not what arguments are designed to do.
So he doesn't have anything, basically.
So yeah, so you don't have an argument, is what you're saying.
Well, no, that's not the same thing.
Yeah, Sean is just look.
I wanted to know.
You're a willful ignoramus. You want to be ignorant. You want to be a moron. Sean, it's not unnecessary. It's perfectly necessary given the hours of conversations that we've had, that I've listened to, and that we're having right now. It's perfectly necessary, and you need to hear this because
no, it's out of line.
Okay. So, Jay, I've warned you, cut the attitude. I'll warn you one last time, and then I will drop you.
Okay, so Roy's got a problem with JRobin pretty much like everybody else, I think. But he's exercising some Christian charity and restraint. He's just trying to... I want to hear what Jay said again.
It's perfectly necessary, and you need to hear this because
no, it's out of line.
You
don't have an argument, is what you're saying.
Well, no, that's not the same thing.
Yeah, Sean is just look.
I wanted to know.
You're a willful ignoramus. You want to be ignorant. You want to be a moron. Sean, it's not unnecessary. It's perfectly necessary given the hours of conversations that we've had, that I've listened to, and that we're having right now. It's perfectly necessary, and you need to hear this because...
Why does he need to hear that, JRobin, if he's being a willful ignoramus and a moron? At what point does he need to continue to hear this? Because if you've gotten yourself to a position as a Christian where you've had conversations, he's just admitted that he's had lots of conversations with Sean, and Sean's not getting it through his head. He's not picking up what JRobin's laying down. And so because he's a willing ignoramus and a moron, he needs to listen to JRobin's beneficial abuse. Like at this point, JRobin can really he can fuck himself off to the sun at that point. Like, this cat is just absolutely out of fucking control. Like the narcissism in him, he needs some fucking counseling. Or some kind of therapy. This is bizarre. I hope he doesn't talk to anybody like this in real life, because the way he talks on social media, it sounds like if he talks this way to people, like every other statement could be followed up with him slapping you across the face for just disagreeing with him, or not keeping eye contact with him, or some other psychotic stunt. Really, JRobin, why are you wasting your time talking with someone that you have now defined as a willful ignoramus and a moron? What are you doing? And what kind of charitable argument is that? Where is your Christian charity? Like, this person is not convinced one way or the other. And JRobin, this is the thing that pisses me off about this so much. This is where Christianity has well and truly died. I mean, everybody can talk about the fact that they don't know what they're doing when it comes to LGBTQ stuff, because they're burdened with the Bible, and the Bible is a fucking disaster when it comes to issues of sexual orientation and anything else that goes on in a modern world. Right? It has to do with anything like how to deal with violence or trauma or any of these other kinds of things we've made real psychological advancements on. The Bible would have us stuck in a horrible dark age of this whole thing. So despite the fact that they've got that hanging over their heads, they can't even sell this shit. JRobin is literally blaming the customer because he can't close the sale. Like, I don't want to go all Glenn Ross on him here, but you always be closing, JRobin. Always be closing. And if you get to a point where you're just insulting your customer, you are no longer closing. You are literally kicking them out the door. They're not going to buy anything. This is not negging at this point. You are not only are you losing that customer, you're losing any potential customers that hear this fucking exchange from you. And that is what this is. This is an exchange. Christianity is fucking transactional. There is something on offer. Salvation. How do you get it? Follow me and my Jesus. If you don't, he's going to get you. I'm not exaggerating. Darth Dawkins has literally said that. His God is coming to get you unless you repent. That's the sales pitch. So that creates the need. What are you going to do? He's coming to get you. There's a way out. Say you're sorry. Join his team. He'll give you everlasting life. That's a hell of a sales pitch. Calling someone a willful ignoramus and engaging in this bullshit like, well, you can't know what reality is, and you're a willful ignoramus and a moron and an idiot and a dipshit. Way to go, JRobin. Way to butt fuck the sale.
No, it's out of line.
Okay. So, Jay, I've warned you, cut the attitude. I'll warn you one last time, and then I will drop you. Okay? There's no need for attitude ever in this room, ever. Okay? So we're going to move on.
I don't have an attitude.
Okay,
I don't have an attitude.
That's fine.
I'm speaking very assertively and very strongly. I don't have
assertive. You're speaking very assertively and very strongly. Those are other ways of saying that you have an attitude.
Attitude. I'm the boss.
Against
yeah. Okay. So just go on mute. Who's next? Who wants to go next?
I got a new question. If
well, what we're gonna let's finish this off really quick, and we'll go to a new question. So we'll get that new question to you in a second, Paul. Anyone else want to address what they've heard about what Sean is doing, what we're doing? Yeah, because I think this is a needed discussion. Always. And if there's a good moderator in the room, and I am calling myself a good moderator, not necessarily great, but good.
Not good, not great.
Because I can see things that maybe you can't, whoever you are.
Well, that's the point of a mod, Roy.
When you start to attack a person. And
you mean like JRobin's attitude? Everyone saw that attitude.
That is
you
not
mean
allowed.
Like you attacking the other brothers in Christ and shutting them down from finishing their statements?
Oh, eat my ass, pork. Get him, Roy. Get him.
Exactly like that, right? Yes. With my tongue is firmly planted to my cheek. Yes, just like that.
Yeah.
Oh, pork is laying on the passive aggressiveness pretty thick.
Yeah.
So
you're shutting down brothers in Christ who are trying to call people to repent.
Hang on.
You're supposed to be lifting your brothers up and forcing these atheist scum into the cattle cars on their way to the ovens and the camps. Right, pork? Jesus Christ, dude. And get a little bit more Team Jesus on you. Fuck me.
Okay.
Hang on.
Pork's got more?
So the only...
No, pork's just going to whine.
The reason that this conversation has gone as long...
Seriously, whoever pork is, if he's watching, get fucked. That was fucking terrible. What the fuck is wrong with you? Get a clue.
As long as it has is because, one, I need to know that you guys understand that I'm letting this go way longer than I would have any other conversation, because I don't know Sean and I want to know Sean. And so far, Sean has made a new decision after I told him new information about this room. And I find no fault in Sean on what he's doing and how he's being treated. I will address that, and I have. And Sean's been very reasonable as far as how he's treating you all.
Wait a minute. Okay? So, you think that he hasn't been...
I'm surprised he's gotten away with it. He's been on here as long as he has. I mean, Sean is the reason I picked the thumbnail for this particular video. It's that photo of Slavoj Žižek, who if Darth knows who that person is, if he tried to listen to Slavoj Žižek for even a few minutes, I'm pretty sure his eyes would start bleeding. But that's a topic for another time.
Been evasive?
Okay. No, I didn't say that, Darth. Darth, stop.
That's a legitimate question.
I didn't say... Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. Just go on mute.
I'm not looking for an argument. I asked you a
question. Well, yes, of course he's evasive. Hey. But I like the way that his...
Roy's acknowledging that Sean's being evasive? I don't know that Sean was being evasive. There were moments when Sean's discussions with Redefine Darth and JRobin. I mean, it's literally like the entire room on Sean at this point, where Sean seems to be a little confused about what these guys are talking about or what they're asking. And it gets harder to actually track that when, instead of dealing with whatever he's attempting to answer, they just say that he's wrong, repeat the same bullshit that caused the confusion in the first place, and then demand a better response from him. Darth style.
Other stuff has overridden his evasiveness, because I want to get to know him. I'm not going to drop him just because he's overridden. I want to get to know. Darth, I'm not going to argue with you. Go on mute. Is there any?
Darth is looking for any word that he can fixate on to justify being triggered with Roy. This is hilarious.
He's not
Anybody
an
else
argument.
who
I mean,
wants
it's
to
just
talk?
he's been entirely evasive.
Darth,
Entirely evasive? So the wall of words guy, the guy that talks too much, the guy that goes on too long, has been evasive. Okay. Like it's been pretty obvious that when Sean had opportunities to kind of attempt to give longer explanations to stuff, Darth wasn't paying attention to anything that he was saying. And Darth says that every skeptic is being evasive. Because if they're not being evasive, they're outright lying to him.
stop
Okay,
it.
Make excuses for the unbeliever. Go ahead,
Okay.
make excuses.
All right.
The fuck?
You have your opinion. You voiced it. Go on mute. All right.
Ooh, Roy muted him. How long will it take for Darth to leave?
Anybody else want to address Sean, share anything with Sean, give him your perspective? And if not, we will move on to pork.
Oh, the guy, not the food. Oh, bummer.
To Paul. Anyone else? Go ahead and open up your
I
mic.
would
You have.
like to ask Sean a question.
Go ahead.
Can we? Oh.
Obviously, Sean, I don't know you, and I do believe in the Bible and such forth, but everyone seems to be attacking you. But can you just clarify your position, why you don't believe in God?
Yeah. Yeah. What exactly would you like me to address?
Well, because so far I've been listening to the conversation and everyone's putting forward their case that you have to believe in God, that God is a Christian God. And I don't necessarily come with that viewpoint. I want to be able to hear both sides of the story. So rather than shutting you down because you don't believe necessarily in how they view God, so I was just wanting to know basically, what is your position?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of different. I mean, primarily, I'm not moved by the same faith that I see to be the strong justification for most people's belief in God. I don't know I don't know why that is or what the case for that is. And I'm interested in hearing what the arguments are and not hearing what the non-arguments are, what all the perspectives are for why people believe. Like I know plenty of believers, and I'm surrounded by believers in my life. Like I said, most of my family are pretty strong believers. And I don't know if it's just doesn't comport with my psychology or the way that I look at the world or what it is. So I don't know if I could give you like a really simple answer about everything that justifies my position.
Sure. Has there anything happened in your life then that's, had an effect on you to stop believing in God?
I think Pork tried to say something there. This is going to get kind of weird because my guess is that whoever this guy is that's talking is trying to find out, like, oh, did you have a bad experience at a church? Were you a victim of some kind of abuse? What happened? That colored your view about this. This to me is always kind of dangerous territory, because for a lot of people that lose their conviction, if they were previously believers, they lose their belief in it. They don't necessarily have to have had a bad experience with religion. In fact, the weird thing is that as they become unconvinced, they may have had nothing but good experiences with it. But then when they get to a point where they're like, you know what, I do have doubts. I'm not convinced this is real. That might be the part that kind of like pushes certain people who were believers in their life over the edge and start treating them badly or treating them harshly. And that can kind of probably maybe reinforce their decision to like not be, well, maybe I was on the right track with, not believing in this religion. But for the most part, it's not necessarily that somebody runs into something bad. So I wonder if Sean's.
I don't think so. Not in terms of like an event or like a traumatic, thing that happened or something that made me like lose my faith. I was raised as a Methodist. So I do think, although different people have different perspectives, I think lots of people would say that, I was never really a Christian or whatever. Maybe they're right. I don't know. But I was.
Oh, definitely.
I was raised in the Methodist tradition. At some points, I drifted away, and there wasn't like a single event. It was just sort of like a gradual transition away from belief to non-belief.
Sure, that's what confused me, because obviously you mentioned about your background of being Christian and such forth. So that's why I just kind of wanted to figure out where you were coming from, rather than everybody attacking you when there's some of us in the room that don't know you, such forth. So I was just curious, that was all.
Yeah, can I just clarify? We weren't attacking Sean.
JRobin was.
Sean made an assertion that there is neutral ground, and he wasn't able to defend that, and we're still waiting. That's all. We're just trying to ask. It's not the position of the room that assertion.
Neutrality.
Shut up, Redefine Living. Daddy Darth's time to talk again.
Sean's various profession of neutrality is contradicted by what he does. He has made it clear that he invokes facts without referencing the necessity of God. This is what he does. Now, if somebody tells me that they're pro-life, but they go get an abortion, right? If a woman says, "Oh, I'm pro-life," but they go get an abortion, then what they do contradicts their claim, right?
That doesn't necessarily contradict their claim, Darth. That's a weak argument.
If somebody tells me that we should not violate somebody's consent, but they actually commit rape, then what they claim is inconsistent with what they do.
But people are inconsistent about what they say and what they do all the time. So I think I understand what he's doing. I'm like, okay, well, you're saying this, but you're doing this other thing. So, okay, so it's necessary for. This makes no sense to me, though. So he's saying that it's necessary for Sean to reference God when he's asserting facts. Okay. So is Darth then conceding that, okay, Sean, here's the problem. You're saying that you don't reference God when you reference these facts, when you assert these facts, but you have to. You have no choice. And then Sean's like, well, yeah, but as an agnostic, that's not really what I'm doing. And then Darth gets all pissed off, like, no, you have to acknowledge that's what's necessary. You can't be doing what you're doing. You can't say that, I can just assert a fact and then somehow stay neutral about God. Yes, he can, because if he's wrong and Darth is right, then he's referencing God when he asserts those facts by default. Darth doesn't have an issue here. This doesn't mean a damn thing. And Sean's not contradicting anything either. There's no contradiction here.
Sean, like every other atheist out there,
he's an agnostic,
who claims that they are suspending judgment in regards to God, will say, "Oh, I don't know. But we've made it clear. Let me ask Roy this question. Roy, is it not clear that when Sean invokes facts, he does so with purpose, without the necessity of referencing to God? Is that what he does?
I believe he does, yes.
Good. Then therefore, what Roy does is inconsistent with his claim to suspend judgment about God.
No, it isn't. And if it is, it might be from Darth's worldview, but it's not even within Darth's worldview. That's not inconsistent. In Darth's worldview, there are people who believe and there are non-believers. There are people who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. Therefore, they can assert facts all day long and get those facts right and not willingly reference God, but God is being referenced even the assertion of the non-believer's fact. That's sort of the whole point. That's evidence that you can use on the unbeliever from kind of a Christian side with this kind of argument. Even you, unbeliever, you concede the reality of the world around you and the beauty of creation when you assert facts about the stars and the sun and the beauties of the skies and the seas and all this other kind of shit, right? That's not that big a deal. So I don't see the contradiction here. I really do not understand what he's doing here. Anymore. I mean, I've always known that the whole point of this was to blur ontology and epistemology in a way that was so baffling that everyone would get confused by this. But the stronger point to make here is that you unbeliever are asserting the my God when you reference this. You think you might be being neutral, but if my worldview is correct, and I believe that it is, and that God exists, when you assert these facts, you're asserting God every time you do it. But that's, I guess, maybe too positive a way to do it. So he has to make this about Sean fucking up. No, Sean, you're getting it wrong. You have to do this. And the fact that you're not doing this proves what a lying, deceitful scumbag you are. Don't you realize you're blowing up your epistemology and by some extension harming ontology? Does God exist a little bit less because Sean's lying about shit? Like, Darth really doesn't track in either direction here.
Because if he
You mean Sean?
believed that, I misspoke. Okay, Sean, excuse me. So this is what we find with a lot of the duplicitous unbelievers on Clubhouse and on Discord. They will claim, "Oh, I'm suspending judgment about God. I don't know." But all we have to do is inquire as to what they do. Do you invoke facts without referencing God? And rather than answer the question honestly, they'll go, I don't know. Well, actually, they do know. They know that they're invoking facts without reference to the necessity of God. They know that that is what they do, yet they claim, I don't know. So what Sean does.
I think that's a good point, AJ, but I don't think Darth has actually thought through it that way. I don't think that he's thinking of it as an ought kind of situation. One ought to do this when one does that. I think he's saying that because it's his God, he believes, is an ontological necessity, and therefore your epistemological, you as a rational being have to reference God. It's an inevitable conclusion. This must be done in order to somehow maintain the coherency of your epistemology. And if you don't, you're just lying. Which is a convenient thing, right? Because anybody that claims like Sean to be agnostic, like, well, I don't think there is any commitment for me to do that one way or the other. And if somebody like me puts that out and says this, like, well, if your worldview is correct, then I'm asserting God every time I assert a fact anyway. That's not good enough for Darth. Because then I could be right or I could be wrong, but I'm not definitely right or definitely wrong. And in his case, it's very important that people like Sean and me be definitely wrong.
Does contradicts his claim to neutrality. And I'm done.
I think that's a false dichotomy.
So let me reset the room for those who are new here. We have some new people. Raise your hand if you want to join us. I see you, Steve. You've got your hand up, and I've been wanting to bring you up. So if you're still there and you hear my voice, just leave the room and come right back, and I'll invite you up because it's not working. And if you're away, just go ahead and accept the offer. So, guys, what we're talking about here today is atheism. And I don't know Sean, but I want to know Sean. So Sean came in a little, not good for me. As
aggressive. He came in aggressive. It's okay. You can say it.
No. I would not use that.
Thanks, Pork. Always helpful, Pork. Get fucked. Sorry. I don't know who Pork is, but he does not. I'm not cool with that guy.
That word. So let me talk.
But then that's poor choice of words.
Pork.
Okay, well, let me talk before I move you to the audience.
Oh, Matt Slick's in there too. Good God.
So Sean has a different viewpoint than I do. I have a different viewpoint than Sean does. I start with in the beginning God. Sean doesn't. So from that point of view. I've heard others who say that he is a this and a that, and I don't know. Let me decide for myself what he is. But as soon as Sean wasn't abiding by the rule of the room, which he probably didn't know, I set the rule for the room, told him what I'm going to do. And he's abided ever since I brought him back up, because I did drop him to the audience. I brought him back up, and he's been nothing but civil. And so I want to continue this discussion with Sean as long as Sean wants to. Sean, you can.
I must have been
say
listening to another
at
conversation.
any time.
Get fucked, Pork. Jesus Christ. You're awful.
At any time. Okay, who keeps talking over me?
Who do you think, Sean? It's that fucking ham hock guy.
One more time, and I'm going to drop you.
You should have dropped him a long time ago. That guy's a menace. Sorry. Seriously, whoever Pork is, somebody find me the identity of that guy. I got somebody to troll. Now, I never engage in trolling, and I do not acknowledge. I don't endorse that. But no, seriously, find him and troll him, my cultists.
Please do not do that. I cannot think when I hear somebody else's voice.
How do you tolerate having Darth on then, Roy?
So with that in mind, I know that other rooms here on Clubhouse and elsewhere probably, I do not visit those rooms if there's no mod who keeps it civil. Don't overtalk each other and keep it civil. That's it. Just respect the other person. When you start attacking the person, I'm dropping you. Attack what they believe. That's it. Now, with that in mind, Sean, I want you to go ahead and share right now and see if anybody
I think I can hear Pork, and I think he's got something with Darth playing in the background.
else wants to join into this conversation. Somebody's got a lot of background noise. Paul, do not unmute. Do not unmute. So,
before you do that, could I raise an issue real quick?
Oh boy, what's your issue, Pork?
Christians were attacking.
Okay, one more time, and I'm dropping you, Paul.
I was asking I was asking you a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask you. All right, I'll bring you back up. You're absolutely rude, and I just, you need to take a page from Sean. So for the new people in the room, like Brian and Nick.
Take that, Paul. You piece of shit, Porker. Sean's better than you, according to Roy, and Roy's a Christian, so you have to take that opinion seriously. So yeah, gag on it, Pork.
And Matt, I know you're coming into this. You know how I mod. You know what I do. If it wasn't for Sean not being known by me, I would have cut this conversation off a long time ago. But there are various people that are atheists that I absolutely would love to have in the room and have dialogue with, me personally. Now, whether you can take it or not, whoever you are, that's fine. You don't have to be on stage.
And I like my pork thinner cut. Yeah.
Just go down there into the audience and listen, or listen on replay, and you can fast forward of the spots that you can't take. But don't tell me what to do with Sean, because it's not going to happen. I'm going to do what I need to do with Sean for the betterment of everybody in the room. Again, I remind all of you, there are people in the room that are here every day. They're regulars. They want to hear what they need to hear because of where their position is and where they are in their journey. I always take that into consideration. It's not just about the person speaking with Sean or Sean, okay, when I have this type of dialogue. So with that in mind, Nikki, do you have anything? And we'll go to Matt next for Sean. And if you don't, just say pass.
I think that wraps it up, because I heard the end of Nikki starts talking, but she doesn't really get anywhere. She just mentions that she's a Christian. It kind of gets cut off. So yeah, that's it. I'm surprised I made it through the whole thing. So yeah, that's it for that. So yeah, I'm not going to apologize for the rants, because those rants felt pretty good. Felt pretty cathartic. Probably waited too long to do a stream. But I apologize if any of my rants bored anyone or made their eyes roll, but it can happen. Anyway, yeah, so that's it for that. I think Sean did a pretty good job. He definitely did a pretty good job staying cool, especially in that particular room. And Roy did a good job. Like I'm sure I would have tons of disagreements with Roy. In fact, I think I did. I think Roy was featured in a video that Tom Rabbit did, and he was making some dumb statements. Roy might have been the one making those kind of dumb statements about like transsexuals or something, or homosexuality in the Bible or something like that. Anyway, but I think he did a good job modding that, and he kind of kept those guys in check. So, but yeah, that's it for that. I'm gonna drop the join link if anybody wants to come in. I've got a little bit. I'm gonna be going offline pretty quick, but if anybody wants to stop in, say hi, complain at me, anything like that. Oh, let's see. That. And I'm just going to pin that message. If you want to jump in as soon as you can, and I'm going to sign off, but that's there pinned if anybody wants to come in here, and we can chat offline. But yeah, thanks everybody for stopping by. Thank you for the views. Thanks for the live chat. The live chat's always fun. It's the best part of doing these things. You guys keep me motivated, keep me on my toes. So thank you everybody for being here. And yeah, we're going to sign off until next time. I have a lot to cover, and I haven't been covering nearly enough. So hopefully I'll get another one of these done tomorrow. Sunday, I do have one scheduled. I'll be tweeting it out pretty soon. 9 a.m., kind of early, but Michael from the Canadian Atheist and I are going to continue our talk about his talk with JRobin. We're going to be going over that again. And then that should do it. So thanks, everybody, and good night. Take care.